talk through this. Easy for listening. I wasn't able to do it. Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to One-on-One Shadow Boxing Have Your Say. Today my guest is Peter Stacken, who is the Sustainable Population Party rep in WA. Peter, tell us something about the Sustainable Population Party.
So it was created in Sydney by our founder, William Burke, and he and I had both been members of the Sustainable Population Australia NGO, which has a long history, about 25 years, bringing up issues concerning with population. But in 2009, Kevin Rudd, who was then Prime Minister, got on the 730 report and famously declared that he was for Big Australia. I'm not ashamed to admit I'm for Big Australia. And the polling and the backroom chat in the Labor Party went ballistic, and everyone was going like, you're crazy. Because when you ask people in the street, there'd been a number of surveys done, news poll, all sorts of polls, party polls, showing that 70% of people don't want the Big Australia and 30% of people either don't know or they're supporting it for one reason or another. Perhaps they're property developers. In any case, 2 weeks later, when Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister, she appointed Burke as the Minister for Sustainable Population.
That's a very nice
obviously
name.
the word had filtered through to the hierarchy in the Labor Party. But then after about 2 or 3 weeks, he became just the Minister for Population Growth, like all other immigration ministers in Australia before him. So at that point, in frustration...
What do you think, why was the change?
I think that the Labor Party realised their focus groups were telling them that people don't want a big Australia, so they immediately Burke was the Minister for Sustainable Population.
Yes.
But I think what happened was the powers that be, who run the big parties, whether it's we call them the Gabrals, you know, the Greens, Liberals and Labor, who all support the big Australia, baby bonus and so forth.
Yes.
They would have got phone calls from their donors, you know, the big property developers and the retailers and the unions who all, you know, want this big Australia thing, and they would have said, if you want to remain Prime Minister, you better change your policy and don't be so stupid and so forth. So he became Minister for Population Growth.
Simple solution.
Yeah.
No, so many bad name or bad feeling created by sustainable, because that's used all over the world, using the Americans, the Europeans, everyone stands up and says sustainability, sustainability.
They talk about sustainable mining, Tibor. You know,
they're talking about all sorts of sustainability.
What is sustainable? I know. Well, we grappled with that.
Please defend sustainability for us.
I can't. I mean, we grappled with that, and when the party was first formed, it was the Stable Population Party, because we thought sustainable is a greenwashed word. They talk about sustainable development, sustainable growth, sustainable mining.
That's the only word they're using these days.
That's why we didn't use it initially. We said stable. We want stable. But people don't understand stable. You know, despite the fact that, as you say, and I agree, sustainable is an overused word, it's lost its meaning, people do sort of understand that sustainable. I mean, sustainable mining means that you can continue to mine until you get caught, you know? Continue to mine until you run out, you know? It's not sustainable.
Not at all.
No, but people don't understand stable. So before the last election, we changed our name to Sustainable Population, #Sustainable Population. So I think people sort of get the fact that we're actually an environmental party, and we view that the environmental destruction which is happening because 7.2 billion of us are swarming over this planet and taking up 40% of the land mass for our own personal use and food and fibre and accommodation, to the exclusion of other species. I think people actually get a little bit of view of sustainable, even though it is a greenwashed word, and I totally agree with you.
It is, yes. So now, so many conspiracy theories around the world which say some people sitting somewhere in the back rooms in New York or in London, and they say we have to reduce the population of 7 billion into 2 or 1 billion. Some of them even got the conspiracy theory is 500 million is the exact number what we should have. How does it affect you?
Well,
You've obviously heard about these conspiracy theories.
I don't take any notice of them. But I mean, it's a matter of understanding what the sustainable carrying capacity of the paddock is. I mean, any farmer will tell you how many animals he can keep in a paddock. And they know that if they overtax the ability of that paddock to sustain the herd, then not only do all the herd do badly, but the actual ecosystem of the paddock collapses. You lose the carbon in the soil, the ability, all the microbes in the soil, and then you come back and you can't put any animals in that paddock. You've destroyed the environment. So I think this is what we're doing. What the carrying capacity of the earth is depends on the technology you can bring to bear to do that.
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Do we know what is the carrying capacity of the
well,
earth?
I mean, the thing is, when I was born,
Yes.
the population of the planet was 2.7 billion. So in my lifetime, it's tripled. There's never been a person living on this planet before, Tibor, who's been able to stand and say, in my lifetime, the population of the planet has tripled. We are not really geared to understanding exponential growth.
And what the numbers really mean.
So our population of the planet is now growing by 1 billion people every 14 years. 80 million a year for the last 40 years. See, the politics of growth, or the biology of growth,
Yes.
is the biology of a cancer cell.
Yes.
And what we've seen before with populations in the wild is that you have a feast, you have a plague, you have a plague of animals.
And few wars.
And then they die. You know, they run out of resources, they run out of food, and then they fall away. And then they pick up again. So, you know, we've had this seesawing effect. But never, what we've been doing in the last, effectively 50 years, is to be turning oil and gas into food. The Green Revolution was about pesticides, fertilisers, mechanisation and irrigation, along with animal husbandry, you know, plant genetics and so forth. But those first four things are all to do with oil and gas. Pesticides and fertilisers come from petrochemicals.
Oil and gas, absolutely.
Mechanisation, a man with a combine harvester can feed 10,000 people. A man with a brace of horses can feed his family or the village at best. So we've done that. Now we're at peak oil globally. We're at about 90 million barrels of oil a day. And in 3 or 4 years' time, I can guarantee that we'll be producing less oil than we currently are. So how
But that's I heard 20 years ago as well.
Yeah, well, and they
But
were
that's
right
not
20 years. It's happening.
It will happen.
It's happening.
I think, but let's look at Australia. What have we got today? And where are we heading? We got now 23 million
23.5
or so a little bit more than 23. So we are on the 23 million marks, and some of the official politicians of the big parties saying we're going to have most likely 50 million in 2050. Which is,
people feel helpless. They say, what can we do? We can't do anything about it. It's natural. We've got to be cleverer than yeast. You know, at the end of the day, we have a mind, we have a consciousness of who we are in time and space. No other species on the planet has that. We certainly could sit down and make a decision. Are we just going to continue to populate the planet until we all starve to death? Until wars like we see in Libya and Egypt and Syria spread all over the world? Those wars are not caused. What are those wars caused by? They're caused by scarcity. They're caused by hunger. They're caused, you know...
And some manipulation from the CIA, from the Americans, and all over the world.
Of course.
So back to Australia before we're going outside of Australia.
The population of Australia last year grew by 410,000 people. So that's a city the size of Canberra we have to build every year. A city the size of Adelaide, schools, hospitals, roads, rails, water, sewerage, telecommunications, you know, hospitals, school, you name it. For a city the size of Adelaide every 2.5 years. That's a huge draw on the public purse to build those things. The things which are paid for by taxes, by our taxes, your taxes and mine. Schools. There's 6 new schools being built in Perth to cater for this population growth. So the children go to school today and they're going into a school which was paid for by the taxes paid by my father and my grandfather, not by me. My taxes are being paid, going to pay the teacher only, not to build the new schools. So in the past, if you needed to build a new school or a new bridge, you would say, okay, we've got taxes which cover the recurrent expenditure, but these capital expenditures like a new bridge or a new hospital, we'll actually borrow money to do that because we know that in time that'll create more economic activity, which creates more taxes, which fills up our coffers down the track.
How can you control the population growth of the 450,000 per year? So what's the combination? Okay. How does it add up?
Let me tell you how it adds up. Last year there were about 160,000 more births than deaths. So that because of the demographic profile, where we've got more people in the breeding age group from,
Yes.
say, 19 to 35.
So, which we're saying we are not an aged country.
No,
we're not
it's,
an
a,
aged.
it's a pyramid. No, it's not.
No.
It's not like Japan, which is like a totem pole, where you've got as many people dying as
I like
there
the
are.
totem pole. Yeah.
Totem pole. You've got as many people, or a condom, I'd say. It's like a condom. So you've got as many people dying as you have being born. And in fact, in Japan's population fell by about 200,000 people last year. So ultimately,
Can we give them 200 from here?
Sorry?
Can we give them 200 from here?
Well, they wouldn't take them because they don't have an immigration. They're not out on the Pacific Ocean like we are. Our politicians going, come to Australia, come, we need you. So they say no. You know, we have strict limits on our immigration policy. So Australia is quite unique in that respect. In terms
so
of
we got the combination of
So we've got about
natural
200
birth. So
Yep.
we are not an aging nation because we now the average
There's
age.
more
What's
children-
the average age of Australia? Do you know
37.
that? 37.
And it's gone up from 30 over the last 50 years. With this ageing population, we should be, why have we got an ageing population? Well, people are living longer, healthier, happier lives. People are working into their 70s and 80s. I mean, Rupert Murdoch's into his 80s, you know? I mean, not that he's an Australian anymore.
No, but God bless him, of course.
Yes,
yeah.
of course. Yeah. But so people are living healthier, longer lives, which is to be embraced and encouraged. And but what you're also seeing is what you need to look at is the number of working people in the community versus the number of people who are not working. And what the politicians are looking at is the number of people in the working age, between the age of 15 and 65. So who's working at 16 these days? I mean, this is an old categorisation which goes back 50 years and it's got nothing to do with
reality.
With
or
reality.
life. No.
And 50 years ago, when Australia's fertility rate was like 3.5, there were many more younger people who are also burdens on the community for their schooling, for their health, you know, all of that. So now we've got smaller families. Sure, there's more people in the older age group. I don't think it's an issue. And in any case, what's the solution? You can't breed your way to having a younger population. It's It's insanity. It's a Ponzi scheme, isn't it, really? You're trying to, like, if you bring people into Australia or have more
it's
children...
a pleasure scheme because everyone have to make kids.
Well, you can practice all you like, Tibor, but you don't necessarily have to have... You know, there's technology available, let me tell you. Bring you into the real world. I'll get you up to date. But Costello has said, you know, one for mum, one for dad, and one for the country. I mean, what stupidity to pay women, to treat them like some sort of cattle. You have to pay them $5,000 to have a child. I mean, people resent that, you know, but that's the policy which is introduced by the Liberals, supported by Labor and the Greens all the way through.
So?
Well, we would get rid of those sort of pro-natal policies. We would make sure that we have good support for children, for education, for health, but we would not be encouraging people to have more than 2 children. We just don't think it's good for the total society.
So how we got these 450,000 people per year? What's the combination of the growth?
Well, it's 60% immigrants and 40% natural organic growth. I have to say organic because someone once said to me, is maybe the rest unnatural? No, well, it's natural, organic growth, you know.
Organic growth, yes. So it's somehow easy to influence both sides.
It's very easy for us to... I mean, we had an immigration policy through the 80s and 90s, which saw net immigration of about 70 to 100,000 people. Now, the Keating and the Labor, Gillard was even worse. They've been bringing over 350,000 immigrants a year. There's no need for us to do that. There's 1 million people in Australia who are either unemployed or underemployed, more than 1 million. We need to train them.
On that note, we have to go for a short break, but please stay with us because after the break, we're coming back much more on one-on-one shadow boxing, have your say from the Sustainable Population Party.